Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Covenant Cast. I'm Zach.
And I'm Steven, and today we're getting into some branding discussion about the cast, also talking about some of the games that we're currently playing. Most of them should be familiar to everybody. And then even talking a little bit about how we've worked together for so long without hating each other.
Or murdering each other.
So welcome and stay tuned. Well, I want to say welcome to everyone who is here listening or watching or listening and watching. We appreciate that you're here, and if this is your first time, or at this point, 90th time.
That's pretty crazy.
We're getting to the big 100. We appreciate your support and welcome.
I'd be curious. I know in the past we've done several different podcasts before we started the Covenant Cast. I would be curious which podcast we've done had the most episodes and where we're at now.
This is probably the top, right? How long did the Mom Pod one go?
I feel like our Mom podcast went for a minute. And I even feel like, what was the one you and Robert did?
There was
Two Guys, One Throne?
Two Guys, One Throne was Game of Thrones, and there was the He Said.
With Robert and Philip.
Another Mom podcast. Yep. There was a lot of them actually back in the day.
I feel like the generic Mom podcast had a lot.
You think it had over 100?
I think we did that for a few years.
It feels like a glimmer of the past that I can't
I'll look.
even
I'll just see where the Covenant Cast stacks up. I have a feeling we're going to win. This is the cast that's going to take.
I think this is the one. In fact, I've been thinking. So, talk to the audience out there a little bit about this. Since we're so happy that you're listening, I like the peek behind the curtain stuff a little bit more than I have in the past. I think that's a great thing to do. And I just think that's the way that the modern business is going to have to operate. I think you have to be open and honest and upfront with people. And I think there's a value to the behind-the-scenes look, especially for people who might be wanting to get into the industry or any business entity, to understand like some of the challenges that are being faced. And one of them for this particular podcast is like I've been thinking we probably need a more compelling name. Right? Like,
sure.
Covenant Cast is fine, but it's the same thing, problem with everything we do. Covenant Cast, Covenant subscriptions, Covenant tokens or components. It's like just putting our name in front of a concept is not adequate anymore, right? So I'm trying to write that down. So I don't know what Covenant Cast would be, but that also leads to if you're me, at least, that leads to a much bigger discussion of, okay, well, if we're going to create a compelling name for something, what is like the mission and purpose statement of this thing? What's the taglines that we're going to use? What are the, what is it? How do we flesh this out? So I feel like we've gotten to the point with the cast where we've started with an idea and concepts, and we've thrown a lot of things at that. And then we went from 3 people to 2 people, and then we had in-depth topics, and then we were racking our brain every week to come up with a new in-depth topic to do.
Week to week, yeah.
Because there's only so many that you can do. For the first 30 episodes.
Well, and not only are there a limited number of topics, but your expertise only goes so
right.
Your knowledge base,
and you don't want to fake it.
Yeah, and you also don't have time to spend 20 hours a week researching the next topic.
I wish we did.
That'd be great. We could.
I wish we did, like a radio lab.
I don't think it would. I don't know that it's feasible or economical, but it would be cool to be able to pick a random topic, right? Pricing and tabletop gaming, and it's have this 10-episode arc where we talk to a bunch of industry people,
bring in leaders. Yeah,
and we talked about that level of stuff. For a while.
The calculus you have to say is is that going to get you to 300,000 listeners, and are those listeners willing to, financially support that in some way or another? And how does that ultimately work? And so, there is a lot of that kind of calculation going on. But even at the very base level, it's having a very clear, this is what the podcast is attempting to do has been on my mind. Same thing with live stream. And I think I'm beginning to feel like this is the, how there's the Toyota method, right? Mm-hmm. So this is kind of the Covenant method to me. And I think it stems from, and there's a question down here from Mutton Chop Piper that I think is going to kind of wrap all of this around. I think every business has a unique blend of people with different approaches to problem solving and just life in general. And all of us come at these problems from a slightly different perspective, just like all of us play games slightly differently.
Sure.
And it's a direct one-to-one correlation between how you play a game and how you want to manage your business. I swear it's the same. It's the exact same.
You have a historical basis for this?
Well, yeah. So I think there's a lot of great examples of this. You're much more interested in getting right to the concept and seeing if it's going to work or not. So similarly, you're less likely to read the rule book and plan out exactly how this game's going to work and more likely to jump in and start playing, right? Same kind of idea. And the decks that you're driven to also are going to be more about, less like just crunching fundamentals and more like finding unique and strange opportunities that nobody expects and, making a play on those opportunities. Whereas I might do more of the wanting to do that foundational work, understanding the basics of how the game is supposed to function, how can you maximize the variables that the game is supposed to be using, and how can you get the max value out of the cards you include in your deck. But then you also like to turn it a little bit sideways and be like, but we also have to have a unique element to this, right?
Yeah. But like you would take, in game terms, getting 1 point ahead every turn for the whole game.
Right.
Or getting 5 points ahead on the first 5 turns and staying 5 points ahead.
Correct.
Whereas I feel like in football terms, even if it's the kind of teams I like to watch, which are the running gun, the long passes, the crazy plays, not like the trick plays. Like combo is what I would compare that to.
That's the trick play.
It's
right?
like, I don't necessarily want the combo where it's like, if we hit this 85-yard pass every time, we'll win. But like teams that will put other teams 20 points down from the beginning. It's just like, because you just couldn't. It's like the thing you would have predicted is the 3-yard run. Instead, we threw the 20-yard pass.
Yeah.
And that led to an 80-yard touchdown, actually. And it kind of,
And see, and Robert's very similar to me. In fact, if anybody out there is familiar with the Myers-Briggs format, we're literally identical, except I'm an extrovert and he's an introvert. And I think that's very questionable because I play an extrovert on television, but I certainly don't feel like one. But Robert is like me in that he's interested in fundamentals, but I am like you in that I want a unique twist.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like splitting the goalposts, because I feel like Robert would run a like non-fancy, non-unique fundamentals first deck and business, right? And it doesn't matter. It's just doing things better than everybody else. It's not really there's a unique thing going on aside from just excelling at it.
It doesn't matter if it's unique.
Doesn't matter.
Is it better?
No, it could be the exact same as like I could do Amazon.
I also think he'll appreciate us psychoanalyzing him on the cast.
Well, exactly. That's why I'm here, really. These interesting conversations. So I want to play the fundamentals, but I want it to be like enjoyable and unique and interesting at the same time. And then you want it to be enjoyable and unique and interesting, but you're not playing the fundamentals as much. You're more looking for things that will eventually become fundamentals, but you're breaking the new ground on hitting them. So like those elements combined, and then other people, of course, different perspectives. Yeah. Heaven forbid I try to figure out how Jonathan plays games. I would love to go there, but I won't. And it's a perfectly valid way of doing it.
Yeah.
So all of that combined into like, now we approach this podcast and it's like, let's just push and jump in and get it and start it. And then it kind of is pivoting now to where I'm like, okay, we've done it, we've seen it. Let's try to establish what the fundamentals of our value ultimately is, what the fundamentals are, I guess I should say. And let's double down on that and let's create that really strong brand around the Covenant Cast or whatever it eventually becomes named. And come out with a very clear purpose. I feel like we've tried a lot of different things and we can, if we put some time and energy into it, narrow it down into this is what we want to be in the podcast space. And it can be unique and it can be of value to people. And that's just been on my mind and I'm really excited about that. So if anybody listening has any commentary on those considerations, I would love to know it. Like, you leave a comment anywhere you want to, we'll find it. And especially #AskCovenant. And I just love to know, like, where do you see us as the valuable piece of the podcasting landscape? Because I'm sure a lot of people listen to a lot of different podcasts. Most people who are into the audio scene have like a commute or something and they have a number of, you're like that. You have audiobooks and podcasts that you listen to. And I'm kind of wondering where we fit into that and what we bring to the table.
Potentially, and this may end up being the question we end with, however many minutes from now. But really, I think what you're getting at, right, is like, why, if you're listening or watching the cast right now, why are you doing that? And what is it about the cast that you actually enjoy the most? Or what, if you, especially if you've been listening to, there's someone posted last week, I think it's one of the comments here, maybe not, but they were saying that they had listened to all 90 episodes.
Yeah.
And it's like, I'm really curious why that person chose to listen to 90 plus hours of us talking industry, talking about our lives, talking about what's going on at Covenant, talking about what's going on with the games we play, etc. But I think the interesting thing of that, even as you're talking, because we haven't even brought this up about rethinking the podcast until now. Here we are. That's the podcast. Maybe we should have saved this for episode 100. But the truth is, right, and I think this is something we learned with the live stream, which we've been doing on Mondays for several months now. But we used to create a whole lot of gameplay videos, which is we'd go to Gen Con, we'd go to Worlds, we'd go to regionals, we'd film games, we'd bring them back, we'd get them, we'd produce them. Various people have edited those throughout the year, but they get edited, they would get popped out. You and I usually would do commentary. Sometimes other people would rotate in on the games. They would get finished, all the card pops and then the score and everything, and then it would get exported, and then it would get uploaded, and then a YouTube description and a social post and all this stuff. And ultimately, asking the question, it's like, why are people watching these? And it's like, well, because, and I think the answer that we kind of landed on was people like watching people play the games they're into.
Right.
Not everyone can play all the time, so at least getting to watch people play is helpful. And then it also, people felt like that they were having the discussion with us as they were watching the game that we were discussing over the commentary.
Right.
And so you pile that together, and it's like, well, if we just stream every week, us just playing games and having a good time and talking about the games as we go, you get the exact same thing with none of the...
With a lot less time invested.
So then same thing with the podcast, though, where maybe this is a really easy place to just catch news for your favorite games, right? Mm-hmm. Or maybe you'd like the big topics that we've talked about and gone in depth over before. Or maybe you like hearing us answer questions from or asking questions and then hearing us answer the questions, right? So there could be a number, and I don't want to like pre-multiple choice this out and say, tell people why they're listening to it, but...
And there could be a concept that encompasses all of those, right? I'm always looking for the biggest umbrella that we can put over something. And I think all content creators and anybody who's looking to place a stake down as in any kind of industry, if you're going to create content, right? So the key thing that you need is you need that unique value proposition. So you need to know why your content is different from and unique from everything else in the field. And then you need to double down on that, and you need to market to that, and you need to produce to that, right? So like if you look at Shut Up and Sit Down, right? They have I know what I'm getting whenever I engage with a Shut Up and Sit Down video, right? It's been the same from the very beginning, and I feel like they've done a really good job of making that case. When I look at Rodney from Watch It Played, right? I'm going to get the exact Rodney Watch It Played video every time. It's going to be cut, like really well cut together. It's going to be extremely clear. It's going to be Rodney doing voiceovers. It's going to be the cleanest way to learn a game.
Sure.
Now, Rodney and Shut Up and Sit Down are doing things entirely differently, and they're doing things very similar, but they have very unique ways of doing it, right? So it's about it's really always about discovering that more than it is creating it, right? Because everybody does have a unique approach to things. So you discover that, you codify it a little bit, and then you double down on it, and then you name a podcast to reflect what people should expect when they start listening.
Sure.
And I think that's kind of the next step for us overall, and this is essentially just kind of the macro branding idea. And I think every game store needs to have that discussion. I think every retailer, online or local, needs to have this. Every publisher needs to have that discussion. I remember, like, even just thinking about Fantasy Flight Games, it's like how they're not pushing out so hard that we're the innovators in the industry and making that, it literally, like, the name can even work, Fantasy Flight, it's like this upward movement of innovation. It's like we did the first unique deck game, the first app integration that was widely successful.
Twilight Imperium was successful because it was the first big box board game.
Right? Product was an innovation, and then it's the LCG format. It's like you should really make your brand known for that, right? And you look at Wizards, and Wizards is like, we should be known for the stable, consistent, like universally popular experience, right? Yeah. So they're kind of it's a little bit maybe derogatory to some people, but I see your mug over there. Wizards are kind of like the Starbucks, right? It's like, it's reliable, it's there in every city, and you can go get it
and you
anytime
know exactly
you
what
want,
you're getting,
right? And they can play to that, right?
Yeah. Well, and they're the only people that have been around for 25 years.
Yeah.
That have a game that's, it's like, I mean, technically like GW with 40K,
Mm-hmm.
been around for a long time, right? But it's like 40K is the miniatures game,
Right?
Right. Magic is the card game. D&D
Right.
is the RPG, etc. And you earn that. You earn that position over a long time.
Yes,
so
you do.
most people can't do that. But I think the Covenant cast it's funny because to me it started out as a catch-all, really.
Yeah.
It was like we need a place for everything. Because
Yeah.
we used to do like Robert did the weekly update, which was just a
The
2
store
to
update,
3
yeah.
minute. Here's all the products coming out and their status and pre-orders and stuff. But it was like we want to be able to discuss the industry, what's going on at Covenant. We want to be able to interact and answer questions from people that are because we would get questions all the time on YouTube comments and emails and stuff. But the Covenant cast as it sits is essentially a Covenant catch-all. And technically, right, that might be what it needs to be. But the Covenant cast could be a 20-minute behind-the-scenes look every week at what's going on at Covenant.
Yeah.
Exclusively.
Yeah.
And then the like bigger topics that we've covered in the past, right, could be its own thing. Where
Yeah.
it's like when you listen to an episode of Industry Talk or whatever, that's a bad name, but you get it, that you're getting a 60-minute produced epic conversation about a serious issue in the industry.
Yeah.
And that's that thing, right?
Yeah.
And it may be that the best version of that is the amalgamation that exists now, but I have a feeling that's not the case.
I tell you, my experience in, I guess, 11 years now. I say 11. Are we at 12 yet?
12. We're past 12.
12 years of what essentially is marketing, although we didn't know it at the time, or at least I didn't know it at the time. The catch-all is generally what you're trying to get away from, right? And especially in the way that content is produced these days and how easy it is for people to produce content. You have to be so streamlined in this is what we do. This is the one thing. I always think about Hot Ones, the YouTube show.
The Wings show, yeah.
I think it's genius.
Yeah.
And it's just a singular concept done over and over and over again. And it works. And you could do that forever. And it's the same with most successful shows, series, etc. You know what you're getting. And anytime you were rewarded, like True Detective is a good example. The first season, you were like, this is what I'm getting from True Detective. Amazing. Second season that's not what I was expecting I was getting from True Detective. I hate it.
And not in a good way.
No, not in a good way. And then third series is, okay, I feel like we're kind of back to what I was wanting out of True Detective. So you see when people fall away from the expectations that they've set with excellence, they get punished for it, basically. Because people are here for a very specific reason. They want something out of this.
And there's a balance, too, I think, of expectations, but more importantly, like what you're choosing to do is going to appeal to a certain amount of people, right?
Right.
So a catch-all inherently maybe is an effort to be wider.
Yeah.
Where anyone that wanted any of this kind of content, this is the one place to get all of these various different things. But it also could mean that the thing I want isn't till 45 minutes in when you guys answer questions. So I just don't listen anymore because it's not worth it, right?
I mean, the average YouTube video is what, like 3 seconds?
Yeah, I think it's literally 1, 2. Yeah, it's about right, 3 seconds. But that's where technically, and now that we're just kind of in this space, and I think we talked last year on the way to Adepticon about what are we going to do with the podcast at this point. That was the last time I really thought about the structure of the podcast, and then that's when we kind of came on the decision of because we were talking about going very produced.
Yeah.
It was very big topics. We really diving into these big meatier things. And then instead of having weekly episodes, have, seasons or have a 10 episode thing on this one topic.
Yeah.
And produce it and do it very well and then take a break and do our thing. But anyways, that's when we decided to kind of get a little more conversational, to peel it back to 2 hosts, and we are essentially where we're at now.
Another thing to keep in mind is that we've also introduced the live stream into the ecosystem, right? Mm-hmm. So if,
where are we going to hang out and chat?
Originally, the cast was like, well, we want to keep people updated. We want to have a constant conversation with people who are into what we're doing and, promote that kind of relationship. And then it's like, well, maybe we can do that better on the live stream. And so now we changed the live stream a little bit. And then the podcast is free to be a little bit more either in-depth or produced or not a weekly occasion, right?
Yeah. Well, and the other thing is it could be that there's something else besides the live stream that needs to happen on a weekly basis, but you pull some of the elements from the podcast, and that becomes the podcast. And then you do some other element where it's here's what's going on this week. Here's some basic conversations about various updates or whatever, or this is the just chill and chat and ask questions and like that kind of a thing. Anyway, there's a million ways to slice it.
You could totally do it that way,
yeah.
right?
And then that's where it's like, maybe the Covenant Cast isn't once a month.
Yeah.
But you have some other things that are happening. Again, like I said, I literally, until you started talking about it here on live on the podcast.
I like to do that. I feel like, and maybe that's a piece of the cast, right? Is literally these kind of organic conversations that happen. Because I feel like, so when we went to Gamma last year, and Gamma is something we want to talk about today on the cast, some of the organic conversations that happen at a place like Gamma are the most valuable, as compared to the presentations where somebody knows what they're going to say and they know the information they're going to give. So that could be a valuable part of the podcast as well, and I feel like it's a valuable part of the tabletop industry, and industry is too formal. The tabletop hobby, right? It's like the organic conversations that happen when we sit down and play a game together are the best conversations. And so bringing some of that kind of conversational, here's a concept, what do you think on the fly, is very similar to what happens when you go to your local store or you have some friends over and you start playing a game together. You also have that same kind of organic conversation. So it's almost like taking that part of tabletop and just putting it in a podcast minus the game.
Sure.
Right? It's a fascinating thing. So I don't know, maybe we should I'd love to do like a branding talk at Gamma or something, like a presentation, maybe next year. That'd be awesome.
Yeah, well,
Talk to Travis or whoever.
I think this idea will appeal to you, which is we could also just have a 20, 30-minute Swords and Stronghold session.
I love that game
once a week,
so much.
Where we just talk about whatever's going on.
I love that game so much.
And that's what I mean by like, there's like the current events conversations we have a lot. And sometimes the current events are big topics.
Yeah.
Like Keyforge gets announced in Unique Deck game, and it's like, there could be an episode on the viability of unique deck games in the industry.
Must be.
Like that, that makes sense.
It must be.
But that's also just kind of the exciting thing to talk about. So like a new set of Destiny gets announced. It's like, naturally, I'm like, oh my God, have you seen these? Let's talk about game design and how they're doing this and that. But like, there sometimes can branch off of that a big conversation, which is like, how do you sustain a game?
Yeah.
Like, should you ever print free on a card?
And should you maybe always go there in the context of a particular game? Because I know that most people have time for one, maybe two games. And if your title involves Star Wars Destiny and you don't play Star Wars Destiny, I don't think you're that interested in the episode, regardless of what it eventually turns into.
Yeah.
So if you're like sustainability of games and then your framing device is Star Wars Destiny's new set, that could work.
That is very different, right? But that's where like, if you had maybe it's just the hang out and play sessions. It could just be the same stream that we do on Mondays or more streams, but intentionally going about just talking about whatever you're excited about and what's new and what the news and stuff. But it's like, if there's a 30-minute thing that popped up in the podcast feed that was like reactions to the new set of Destiny, there are people that would want to listen to that.
Yeah.
That's what I was going to say earlier, is right now it's kind of catch-all. And so like, there are some people that want it all. And just enjoy hanging out and listening, which is awesome. Like, it's pretty incredible if that's the case. But at the same time, the more specific you get on a topic, the more relevant it gets to the audience.
Yeah.
But also the smaller the audience gets.
Right.
And unfortunately, tabletop as an audience is already so specific.
It's very small already.
That like it's small. So then you go into, even with the Covenant cast, we're kind of hovering around 8 or 9 games specifically that we're kind of following or playing or interacting with. So now you're zooming in even closer. And then it's like you title an episode about Destiny, and it's like, well, now we're literally, like, this is the smallest, this is the niche of the niche of the niche.
Yeah, it gets pretty tiny.
Which is pretty crazy.
Interesting stuff. Yeah, well, that's what's going through our heads at Covenant right now. So if you guys have any comments or thoughts or feedback on that, of course, we would love to hear them. And we'll continue to move forward. That is something that I think is inevitable. There's one constant, is that trying to make things better and innovating on things is always the objective. And I'm happy for that. I'm glad that became a part of the DNA.
The process, yeah.
So that's cool.
Maybe, so this is episode 90.
Yeah.
And I have no timeline for any of this, but
make a decision by episode 100.
That's where I was going, which is like, I think by episode 100 we may have figured out whatever is the next phase of this. So if you're listening, and I know there's a ton of people, and I'm always super grateful this is the case, came to the regional for Destiny or meet us at conventions, and they talk about listening to the podcast every week and loving our conversations and whatnot. So what you also don't want to do, probably the biggest sin that you can do in any organization or business, period, is take the people who love whatever it is you're doing and then totally, it's like True Detective, right?
Yeah, just alienate.
Curveball so hard that you just alienate. And luckily, I think that for them, the first season of True Detective was so good that people are willing to come back for season 3 to give it a shot. And I haven't seen it, but I've heard that's a lot better. So anyways, what we don't want to do is pivot to the left and then have everyone who's listening right now to what we're saying be like, this is not what I'm after anymore. But at the same time, we're going to keep pushing forward to try to make it better and more appealing and more relevant for everybody who does want this kind of a thing. So we'll see where that goes.
Yeah, well, just trying to do better. What more could you ask for?
You want to cover some news?
Let's talk about the reversal format because
How'd that
Jonathan
go?
and I played it on the live stream on Monday. We each brought what we felt was our worst Keyforge deck, or to put it in the parlance of FFG, most challenging to win with.
The old marketing spin zone.
And so I brought one, he brought one. With the first game, he played the one I brought, I played the one that he brought, and I won. Then we swapped.
That's actually impressive because I had hopped on the stream to check the audio video quality because I know it's something we were always checking at the very beginning.
Right,
and I was like, I'm just going to check and let them know what's going on. And one of the things I remember hearing you say, like 2 turns in to the game, was like, this deck is a pile of garbage.
Yeah, well, they both were.
Yeah.
So we made good on the promise of the format. But his pile, as it turned out, was way better than mine because I won with his deck and then he won with his deck. And so we were like, I think we've solved it. Like, this is definitely the worst. My deck was definitely the worst because nobody won with it.
Yep.
So I was like, all right, we put that away, and then we couldn't resist the temptation. We had 2 brand new Keyforge decks sitting there.
Those are hard to come by.
They'd been sitting there for a while, and we didn't really know what to do with them. And so we just cracked them open, as you do.
Yeah.
That's what you do.
It's really addicting.
And then we played a game with those decks, and both of us were so amped by the decks that we opened. Like of the 8 or 9 that I have, that is number 1 easily.
Really?
Both of them were the Brobnar Logos, whatever
Sanctum?
the other one, Sanctum. So same houses, kind of similar spreads, but Jonathan hit the thing he's been looking for forever, which is Mother.
He got 3 mothers. So he
3
was telling me about
mothers
that.
in the deck.
And what does Mother do?
It lets you draw an additional card at the end of your turn.
So if you have a couple of those out, you get some pretty crazy draws going.
And the crazy thing about it, the best thing about him is and you find this in cards that work now rather than after your opponent's been able to respond,
Sure.
right? So you put it out and you're drawing another card immediately.
That round.
So you drop 2 of them and you're at 8 cards.
Yeah.
And in Keyforge, that can be such a huge swing.
Well, and I feel like because you aren't looking at your opponent's hands, right, and you can't see their future hands, it's less oppressive than something that is affecting me.
Yeah.
So, like, there are cards where it's like, oh, at the end of your turn, I
Succubus,
lose an
right?
amber, right?
Yeah.
Or I draw 1 less card, and it's like,
That's got to go.
priority number 1, that's gone. I can't let you stop what I'm doing. But it seems like the kind of thing that's just good enough that you might let it slide on your opponent's table for a round or 2.
And it's 5 power.
Yeah.
Right?
You got to do some work.
So yeah, sometimes you just can't swing at both of those and get them off the board.
God forbid that's in a deck with, like, a couple bulwarks.
Yeah.
Where it's just like
some
bam,
taunt
with some
and stuff.
armor. It's like, oh.
I think he has some taunt in the deck.
Yikes.
So that's amazing. That's an amazing piece of this, is that not only were the decks incredibly fun to play right out of the box, but both of us were very satisfied with the things that we pulled.
That's awesome.
And then the reversal format as a whole was a ton of fun because it felt like you were definitely on the same level because nothing was like working, right? So you had to figure out ways to get amber in the least ideal possible combinations, right? I was playing cards that were essentially worthless to try to gain amber off the top left corner, right? And it was like gaining 2 amber in a turn was like phenomenal. Turn.
So was just macro level, was playing 2 awful decks against each other more, in your opinion, or less fun than playing 2 really good decks against each other?
It's hard. It was right down the line. There's something very satisfying, like seeing that you had a bad turn, and normally that's like, I'm gonna get way behind here, and then your opponent laughing at how bad their turn then is. And that going back and forth, it really changes the atmosphere of the game.
Sure.
Where you're both just kind of like laughing at how ridiculous and ineffective you are, rather than like trying to crush your opponent. Right?
Yeah, that's really funny.
With two good decks, it's like I have all the tools, you have all the tools, and it's like heated. It can be heated, depending on just player personas. But with Reversal, I don't know. The way that we played it, I don't know how you could get super serious about it.
Yeah, I don't think there's a way.
It's like I was holding a card for like 6 turns trying to get a turn where he would play 3 creatures, and he didn't have... Like, there was not a turn where you could play 3 creatures in those decks.
I feel like it's the kind of thing where, like, my ideal Keyforge scenario would be 2 medium good decks. Mm-hmm. Where, like, it can't ever be out of control, but it's also like we both have bad turns, kind of a thing. But I know there's cards that are like, I think the one he may have given you initially was like, or one or the other, was like a lot of like, for every Martian creature you have cards, and then there's like 2 Martian creatures in the deck.
Exactly. Both of us did the exact same thing on that.
So like, if it was too skewed that direction, I could see it being just like, I'm just doing nothing.
Yeah.
Like it's like discard 3 cards next round.
Yeah.
And that's different than like having to play a suboptimal creature or not getting the full, like the card that's like play 3. It's like, okay, but like you still gain 1, so it's kind of, you're doing something. But it does feel like the, if you can just lay back a little bit, and it's like, this game's going to take a little longer, and like neither of us are really cruising along.
And the strategies are different, because like you might have 1 or 2 cards that if you utilize them exceedingly well, it's a huge swing.
Sure.
And then you might be wanting to burn as many cards as possible to get your discard pile shuffled to get those cards back in your hand, right?
Sure.
It's like, I've got 3 creatures. They're all in the discard pile. I need to like just dump cards so I can reshuffle. Yeah. So that was a fascinating thing, and I think it speaks to one of the maybe untold strengths of Keyforge as a game. I wouldn't feel comfortable playing that format in a constructed environment of any collectible game. Like, it would be too easy to make an awful deck that is simply unusable, right? So Keyforge at least can put a floor on how bad a deck can possibly be, and know that even if you hit that floor, you're going to have a game, right?
And like, can create a format out of it.
Yeah, and I wouldn't even want to, I wouldn't be excited to spend my time racking my brain for hours saying, how can I make the worst constructed deck possible?
Sure.
But I can look through 9 decks and say, I hate playing this one.
This one,
I'll give it to you.
See, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and I think there is something cool about going to an event, and either, like, let's say you had 10 people, you all drop in your worst deck, and then it's shuffled up, and the only rule is you can't get your own deck back. Mm-hmm. And then you play like a regular event or whatever, or just every round you're taking your deck and then you're swapping. So you're playing, let's say 4 rounds, you get to use 4 different decks from 4 different people that are all equally not great. And just as a way of like seeing if anybody else can make your deck work.
Yeah.
Because I think sometimes, I remember there was that one deck we played on stream way back, which was like, game 1 was rough.
Yeah.
And it was like, this deck is terrible. And then game 2, you crushed me. Mm-hmm. And it was like, this deck is not as terrible as I thought. I just didn't know what I was doing.
That's the thing. Sometimes you discover. I mean, you hand somebody a deck and you're like, this is awful. And then you're like, whoa, you did some stuff that was really incredible.
Yeah.
So that's cool. And you might discover some things.
That is interesting.
So everybody can check out our Facebook page if you're a Facebook user to find out. We've got all of our live streams are trying to get scheduled ahead of time. So if you look at the events on the Team Covenant page, you can see all the future live streams up to a couple of weeks in advance.
Yeah, and it's important to note too, I think even recently some of these changed around. Like I know Arkham was originally a week earlier, and then it was like, oh, that's Gamma week, we're going to be gone, we're not going to do Arkham. But that's a good way to stay up to date on the streams, because those are also potentially changeable.
Yeah.
Like,
if you like click the going or even interested, I think on the event, it'll update you if it's been changed.
But yeah, I'm actually looking forward to it this week. So the day this episode comes out is the release day of the new Transformers set, Rise of the Combiners. And that's what we're streaming on Monday. So I think the plan is I have my booster box for my subscription that I'm going to save until Monday for us to do the same thing we did last time with, which is
perfect.
Open a box, build 2 decks, and then see how awful it is. And then the week after that, we're going to Gamma, which I want to mention. And then the week after that, we're doing Arkham, which I'm actually also very excited about.
Yeah, you get to play some Arkham. I'm going to teach you how to play Arkham.
So what's your take on Gamma?
Well, so I think it's pretty fascinating that, in the most boring sense of fascinating, that it has sold out
The retailer badges are sold out.
And previously, I don't think it had been selling out, if I'm not mistaken.
As far as I know, because I know they have a new leader. I forget what the title is called. It's not like CEO.
Yeah, there's a lot of like drama around that, which I don't follow any of this.
Yeah, I didn't follow that. But there's a new leader, and he posted a comment about how pleased they were to see attendance kind of skyrocketing, because the place where it's at, we went last year, relatively big.
It's huge.
I don't know how many like spots they have, but I can't imagine it's like, it's not like we're talking like, oh, there's 300 seats and they all sold out. I think we're talking thousands of people. And I don't know if that's just their marketing. I know that they also, in that same thing, thanked Asmodee, who is the publisher for Fantasy Flight Games, for the Keyforge promotion, which is really cool. If you're unfamiliar, they're basically making a Keyforge display of 12 decks for every retailer that was signed up by some date in December, that has their store name on the deck. So like, we're going to get 12 decks that say Team Covenant on it, which will be pretty cool. And that's the case for every retailer there. And so that's a pretty cool thing.
I mean, it's great both directions, right? It incentivizes a ton of Gamma attendance, because not only is it just incredible to have your brand on a Keyforge deck and be able to have that for your local players.
And it's going to be registered on the app.
Yeah.
It's going to be if this deck actually does well, right? I mean, that's kind of,
right.
It's this weird, like, not necessarily sponsored by, but like, how are retailers going to handle those decks? Like, my assumption is a lot of players are going to end up with them.
Yeah, but it also, any retailer who's not already selling Keyforge all of a sudden has a big old taste of what it's like and has their name on stuff, and that, plays to a lot of people's sense of like importance or ego,
And that's a set of 12 decks when decks are not easy to come by right now.
Exactly, right? The product's even hard to get. So like a mix of all those factors, Machiavellian and not, are like, it's a pretty good thing, I think, overall. I think Asmodee is going to win on this, and I think retailers are going to win on this, and Gamma is certainly going to win on it. And Gamma's an interesting thing. We should probably do I would love to do a full-on what is Gamma episode for my own edification, because we kind of I feel like I stumbled into knowledge of Gamma. I knew that the Origins convention was Gamma, and then everyone, the past few years before we were going, we went for the first time last year, was like, oh, you should be a Gamma. You got to go to Gamma. And we're like, why? What is Gamma?
For me, it was several years of, I'd be talking to someone in the industry, like a publisher or a distributor or another retailer, and the question would come up, right? It's like, hey, are you going to be at Gamma? I'd love to catch up. And it's like, no, we're not. I'm not going to be at Gamma. But
tell me why.
And even then, it wasn't like, no, I was just like, we're not going to be at Gamma. Yeah. And eventually, after enough people are asking, it's like, tell me about Gamma. Like, why is this relevant? And ultimately, Gamma is and I think we will do those kind of episodes. So we're going to be going, maybe we'll sit down with some of the Gamma people and even talk to them about it. But the reality is, as far as I'm aware,
it's a trade association.
It's a trade association.
Which is something that I think our generation is not even likely to understand.
Yeah.
Right?
It's basically a group, and the group elects people to administer it and run it and whatnot, and then the people that run it hire people to do the marketing and do the whatever. But essentially, it's an industry group. So there's publishers, there's distributors, there's retailers, and there's anyone that makes stuff for this industry. And they all come together and they meet for a week, and there's a bunch of panels and there's a bunch of discussions. And I think at least for us, the most relevant part and the most interesting thing, like you were saying earlier, is kind of the water cooler talk, which is like the random people you run into and talk to, and the game designers and the publishers and the other retailers, because we're all from different parts of the country. We all have different perspectives. We've all gotten to where we're at now in different ways and different experiences. And so, and I think we do things quite a bit differently than a lot of retailers, just from the simple fact that we don't sell some of the biggest games in the space. Magic, Pokemon, Yu-Gi-Oh, Card Fight, I think is
40K.
40K. So we have some really, like, even just starting to understand how they perceive the space is just fascinating. Like, it's like, this is actually pretty crazy. So it was cool. We're going back this year. We're actually taking a few more people. I think we're going to be doing some more
content from Gamma. Yeah. So we really kind of want to tell that story, especially for retailers who may also be in our situation. I think anybody who's starting a store in the past 5 years and moving on to the future isn't going to have an immediate appreciation or understanding of what Gamma is and why it matters. So hopefully we can give our perspective as like Covenant attending Gamma and understanding what the experience is like, because you're way more likely to do something if you have an expectation set of, okay, I know what I'm getting myself into, rather than just throwing yourself into a random event and saying, I hope, I figure this out.
Sure.
People are always more likely to do something if they have an understanding of what that entails and what it's like and what it looks like and what it feels like and who's there and getting that impression. So I think we're going to try to do some of that content and maybe, like you said, talk to some of the Gamma people. So anybody who's interested in that kind of thing, which I hope, it's probably a smaller amount of people than I hope that it is, because I think there's a genuine curiosity for me about how things work.
Sure.
And just like, what are the inner workings of this and that? And we're going to try to give that to people as far as what the retail side of this industry ultimately looks like.
Well, and I think, we do this a lot on the podcast, but I think there's an immense value even as players in the community of these games in understanding how the industry functions and works.
Yeah.
And that's something else we've done on the podcast for a long time, which is
probably my favorite thing that we do.
We're giving our take on the industry and how we see things and how we break it down. And I do think, I've seen so many comments over the past couple of years doing the cast of people who didn't understand this is how it worked.
Yeah.
They assumed a certain thing, right? And like most of the time, those assumptions are way off.
Yeah, which we find out all the time, right?
All the time.
We went through that process for years.
So I think regardless, like if you're a retailer or a publisher, it'll be interesting content. But even as a player of the games, I think it's just as interesting.
And certainly relevant. Valuable,
yeah,
you might say. Even if you're like, I don't want to, maybe you should.
It's worth understanding.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things I think I took away last year was just how it's different. It's crazy. I feel like business is crazy in general, but I also feel like this business, not Covenant, but this industry is
it's a fascinating industry.
Exceptionally interesting.
And it's so on the verge of change, and I think everybody who has any amount of foresight and understanding knows that. And at the same time, it's as amazing that it's so slow to change, that it is that it's changing. It's like everybody knows it's changing, yet it's not really. Like at the same time, both of those things are equally true.
Yeah.
And so it's just always to see exactly especially what other folks are doing with their stores and what they think the future is and what their customers are, liking about their experience. And even having like Travis with his giant mega store, and then Patrick with 3 or 4 or 5 different smaller stores and malls up in the Northwest. And then what we're doing and how everybody across the country is approaching this differently, and how there's systems that have been the same for 30 years, and then there's systems that are brand new, and how Kickstarter is disrupting things.
Sure.
It's just an amazing conversation to be having.
And there's a general sense, and maybe we'll get into this. I assume, I don't know, I haven't talked to you about this specifically, but I assume we'll be doing another kind of retail cast with
I think we have to do
Travis,
a retail roundup, if you will, yeah.
But I think the most fascinating thing is, even with our very different approaches to tabletop gaming, is the reality that we all have the same sense, this underlying sense that the ground is moving.
It's like the meta is not solved.
Yeah, it's like
right?
The ground's moving, and I see your approach, I see your approach, and I respect it, right? And I understand how it's working. I know why it's working, but we all know we're all gonna have to change.
Yeah.
And we've been talking about this for weeks on the cast, which is just like, how is this sustainable? How is this thing moving forward, and how are we gonna move forward from where we're at right now? But it is both incredibly fast and incredibly slow. Mm-hmm. And so I don't know. I think it's an interesting time to be covering tabletop.
And you're either excited by change or you're scared by it. And if you're the latter, it's not going to be not good.
If you were paying attention when you were psychoanalyzing me earlier, I'm not afraid of change at all. Let's get on it.
Well, speaking of things that are unchanging, let's talk about this Destiny delay, shall we? What's going on with this thing? I don't even know anymore.
I'll tell you what happened. Last November, we got the 6th set of Destiny. And in my heart and in my head, I said the following. And in my decks, this was reflected in my deck list at the time as well, which is Worlds is always in May. Since I can remember, for Destiny, it's always been in May. For Star Wars, it's always been in May. Not really always, like 3 years. But it is always technically, because Destiny's only been around for 2.5 years. But all that to say, is like, I expect that between November and May, we'll get another set of Destiny.
That seemed like a very conservative estimate.
They said,
at that
hey,
time,
we're
actually.
targeting 3 a year. They did the thing with Andrew, the head of the studio, and he was like, we're targeting 3 a year. We're already working on set 10. This is going to be insane and awesome. Everyone was like, yeah, let's do it. And then we waited 4 more months for a set. But it's pretty practical that it's not coming out till May. Or not coming out till May. That's not true. That it's coming out before May.
Right.
Which means...
You have to imagine that if a set releases in November, you're absolutely guaranteed. I mean, when you say it'll release before May, like most people would say, like, that's super conservative.
Yeah, I mean, maybe you might be expecting that a second set is coming by May.
Yeah, as early as May. That would be great.
That's
possible.
Back in November.
Right? I mean, we've all seen how Wizards does this thing, right? They pump a Magic set out about once a day.
But if they're doing 3 a year, you would expect about once every 4 months. So it's like November, we're looking at February, then we're looking at May, June. This is cool. So the other thing is with the next set coming out, set 8, if you're unfamiliar with Destiny, is rotation, which means sets come out and every 3 sets is a trilogy. Every 2 trilogies is the standard format.
Right.
And so when set 7 comes out, that means we're starting the 3rd trilogy of the game, and the first trilogy is no longer legal for standard play. So set 6 comes out, and I say, sets 1 through 3, be gone.
Sayonara.
Get out of it. I'm going to go ahead and rotate because I want to have 3 months early advantage testing these cards for Worlds when it comes around for May. Couple updates since then. First things first. First is 3 things. First is that the trilogy format for Destiny is incredible, which got me really excited about Destiny. Like, the card pool is way different.
Like, right now, it's incredible. Or the idea of a restricted card pool in general fits the game best.
When you cut out the first 3 sets and we're just on the second 3 sets, that card pool is awesome.
Much better.
So that got me really excited. And then I had to go play at... I didn't have to go play. I went to go play at a couple regionals.
Wow, what cruel fate.
Playing the standard format, which is all 6 sets again. And that only reinforced my conviction that once rotation happens, this game is going to be a lot more fun, for me at least. But we still don't have Convergence, which is the next set. Early estimates were way back, like a year ago. It was like, probably January, February is the feeling, just based on the timelines. Set 5 got pushed back a little. Set 6 got pushed back a little.
A lot of feelings involved in the release schedule here.
Not a lot of hard dates, I'll say that much. So anyways, we still don't have the set. I saw earlier on the Your Destiny Discord, which Your Destiny is a content creator based in the UK. They're great. But they... in their Discord, some retailer in the UK had posted new expectation is April, and they just lost it. It's like we can't go another month. Like, this is crazy.
Yeah.
But regardless, the other thing that happened is Worlds got pushed back to like October, November. So that also just doesn't matter anymore either. It's going to be a whole different game by the time we get to Worlds.
Yeah.
So in terms of Convergence, though, who knows?
So this is the thing that I continue to struggle with.
I don't think you're alone.
But it's like we're almost in. When was the original? Wasn't there an original like release date window target? Did we ever get anything official from distribution or from FFG that said, "Hey"?
Only thing.
Did they say like Q1?
Q1.
They said Q1.
Yeah.
Okay, so Q1 would entail that by the end of March you have the new set. Now, technically, that's still possible, right?
Oh, absolutely. So it could still come out in the next 2 or 3 weeks, and it would be Q1 because it's in March.
But then you also, what always happens in these situations is you get these weird rumblings from like the underground distribution supply chain people who start like somewhere like seeding this information, and then it starts to expand, and retailers catch wind of it.
Classic game of telephone, and it changes.
And then they post it to their players, and then...
We also have like a few other signs, which is like we started getting spoilers. We posted spoilers, FFG posted spoilers, other content creators posted spoilers. They did the live stream with the new starters. They did the live stream with the booster box. So at this point, we know
imminent, right?
We know 90 to 100 of the 160 cards, which is usually the sign that like it's imminent. But the thing that's probably like most disruptive from a retailer's perspective, and what we're trying to do, is that because there's not a release date, there's not release expectations. Last July, when Way of the Force came out, it was literally 8 or 9 days before release. It was the week before release. They were like, "Hey, it's coming out next week," and it's like, cool. And that's the weekend of 4th of July, by the way. So happy holidays. So
now, what is standard practice for those keeping score at home? Like, what would you expect if you were buying a set of, or if you were a retailer of Magic, for instance?
So it's a little I mean, it's not unfair, but the way Magic works, they're huge. They're 25 years in.
Right.
They've got this whole thing.
They've got it nailed
down. But they announce sets and release dates way in it. Like, I'm talking, the next 3 or 4 sets, names, dates, at worst months. It's like, this is the month it's coming out. And I don't think they've ever had to delay or miss that ever.
Yeah.
I think they're on a whole different scale than like Destiny. And so I think that's the weirdest thing for me, and I say this every time, is just the total lack of communication.
Yeah. That's what I was going to say as well. It's like a Facebook post away from either, hey, everything's fine, like the set will be here soon, we'll be in touch. Even that, as vague as it is something.
Yeah.
Versus like, oh, hey, who knows why? Yeah. I don't know why this stuff keeps happening.
And I don't
It's been delayed.
I don't care why.
Yeah.
What I care about is like, if they had said, hey, way back. Because basically we got legacies last January. Mm-hmm. So then if you do the 4-month spread, it's right, February, March, April, May, June, July, August, September, October, November, December, January. Then that's why by May we'd even have the next set. So we're that far behind, right? Like from back then. But if it had started and it was like, hey, we're kind of targeting set 7. We don't have the name yet, but like set 7 for January. And then we get to like July or September, and then they're like, hey, actually, that's going to be pushed back to February. Mm-hmm. Then we get to December, and it's like, well, actually, this might be moving all the way back to March at this point, but we're going to get it out as soon as we can. We'll be in touch. Then they get to February, and it's like, this is getting sketchy. Maybe not. I don't care about the reason. It doesn't matter what's going on, because who knows? Because I mean, I imagine they're printing this in China, and there's boats involved in customs and printing issues. It's like, who knows? You could get all the way to the finish line, and then it's like, hey, we actually misprinted this thing on all of it. And you got to go back and fix this. Whatever.
Yeah, who knows what.
But I say all that to say, we don't know when Converge is coming out. My assumption is that it's coming out in March based on the Q1 estimate, but those have been wrong a lot. So,
and you have all these weird people pushing back, like big retailers pushing back dates, right?
Yeah, that was the thing that I saw in the Your Destiny thing. But the other thing is you have weird stuff like Adepticon is in a few weeks, which we're going to as well, or I guess it's in a month. My thinking, by the way, is months right now. It's not days or weeks.
Yeah.
And so like I caught myself the other day talking about like next weekend, and it was actually 2 weekends from now. But it's because that's just where it was very, very weird. But Adepticon's coming, and there's a bunch of Galactic qualifiers, and I was even looking at this because I got the email. It's like tickets are done in 2 days. So if you're going to sign up for an event, you have 2 days to do it. And it was like, well, there's Trilogy, and there's Standard, and there's Infinite. And it's like, if Convergence comes out 11 days before Adepticon, then Trilogy is 1 set. If it comes out after that, Trilogy is 3 sets.
You can't even plan for it.
Standard and Infinite are the same if Convergence doesn't come out.
Yeah.
Because it's all the sets. It's literally currently all the sets.
Boy, that's fascinating.
And you just don't know. So like even I was talking to some people who had ordered some Saga sets from us, which is 1 of every Legendary, 2 of everything else. And it was like, hey, if it comes out the week before Adepticon, what are the odds that I get it in time for the event? And it's like, I mean, just stay on the horse, man. I have no idea.
We'd love to know that as well, right?
Yeah.
I think that's one of the biggest things that causes frustration, is that it crunches. Like, from the top, it crunches all the way down to the customer, right? Where it's like, we don't know. And because we don't know, and then we don't know because distributor doesn't know.
Yeah.
Distributor doesn't know because FFG doesn't know or isn't saying anything. And maybe FFG doesn't know because factory over here isn't spilling the beans, or they don't want to, embarrass themselves, or I don't know how all of that works, but
and I think I'm reading into the situation, but like my assumption is that because we're behind, and Destiny has been behind since the beginning, because they printed Awakenings, and there was nowhere near enough.
Yeah.
That essentially what's been happening is the moment it arrives in the U.S. and is capable of being distributed, they are distributing, like within a week, they're distributing it. Let's get it to retailers. Let's get this set out. Because you're always in the desert. So
you're
it's
always
like,
trying
we
to
got
catch
water,
up. Yeah.
Put the water into the system.
Yeah.
Whereas I have to believe, and again, Magic's on a different scale. They probably have to do this, which is they probably have portions or most of the product well before the release, right?
Yeah.
Where it's like, technically, this would not be happening if they had the Destiny product 2 months before they released it. And it was like, hey, when we get the product in, we're going to send a 60-day notice. We have the date. Here it is.
Yeah.
Do it. I have a feeling it's days.
Yeah.
It's like, we have it. Go to the distributor. Get this out there.
Because can you afford to warehouse it for that long? Right? Can you afford to ship it to a warehouse and let it sit there for a month or two and then push it out to distribution?
Yeah. And that's
what's that worth?
Saying, like, what's that cost Magic worth? At a different level, where it's like if they're printing, I think I saw a stat the other day, like 20 million players. And so, like, even just the reality of if every player is buying on average a box of every set and you print 20 million boxes, you probably can't have that all arrive in a week's time and ship that out to a distributor. Right. You have to have a much more elaborate system with way more warehouses, with,
and you have more sway, right?
Way more sway.
You have the ability to make people deliver on dates that you're setting on the manufacturing
level. They may even
level.
own their own factories.
Yeah.
That may be another layer of this, right? So there's a lot of reasons it is the way it is, but I think that's where, like, that's going to be the way it is. What could change is the communication for me.
Yeah.
Which is, like, even just right now, knowing, hey, this is our expectation.
Here's the estimate.
Things could change. We'll keep you posted.
Yeah.
Instead of the rumor mill.
Because you allow speculation.
Yeah.
You always allow speculation.
Yeah. So that said, that actually means there's still time if you want a Saga set for Convergence, because we have no idea when it's coming out.
Yeah, there is. We're almost out. Last I checked, the stock was getting pretty low on what we're willing to pre-sell and guarantee that we can produce in time to hit those timelines. So
because right now it's on within 1 week. It starts out as by release it ships, and now we're within the 1 week window. But
and also keep in mind, if you're on the fence on those, we're sending out some random sets of golden Saga tokens with Saga sets and subscriptions. So it's a really good time to get on that and get a shot at those tokens. I think it's going to be super fun. The people who randomly open it up and get a set of, like, super awesome.
I just hope we get some, like, pretty epic reaction videos.
I hope we get some good social posting too. I'd love to see people like, oh my gosh.
But yeah, that's what's going on with Destiny. Who knows? Worlds is later this year, so, like,
I gotta tell you, Zach, it sounds like second verse same as the first. Actually, 8th verse same as the first. Let's go to #AskCovenant where we answer your questions here on the podcast, which is what we're doing, and we're gonna kick it off with question number 1. From Thomas Arcaretti.
Arcaretti?
Arcaretti. I think of, like...
He comes to our events. He's from Texas, I believe.
Oh, very cool. Yeah. Very cool. I was wondering if you could talk about your experience with Kickstarter. I know some of you are back in Godtear, and that looks really fun, but it seems they're running into delays, much like some of SFG, Steamforged Games, past Kickstarters. I personally have backed several projects that have delivered within reason, but I have seen some disasters. Usually it seems it's due to people overextending themselves on things they create.
Man, I have some answers on this.
Well, we did an entire podcast on Kickstarter. I think that's really relevant here, and we probably should do another one. There's no greater disrupting force in tabletop games than Kickstarter and Amazon. So I would think we need to revisit them both pretty often.
And I'd be happy to do that. I mean, I think my experience boils down to when I kickstart something, I understand I'm kickstarting it.
Yeah. You're a seed investor, right?
Yeah, it's like I always kickstart assuming I'm not going to get it. It's like I have to be okay letting this money go.
Yeah.
Because they could just totally fail. Because it's like a startup round of financing, and 99% of people that do startup financing need a second or third or fourth round.
Yeah.
So, like, you can't get that right. And I think the main thing is, like, one of the ones I backed a long time ago was the deluxe version of Tokaido. Mm-hmm. And it had, like, 40 pre-painted miniatures or whatever. And so the thing about it to me is, like, I almost always, at a glance, at a Kickstarter, can tell if they're going to be able to deliver on time. Because the moment you get past 10 models of anything, just add 2 years.
And have you ever manufactured anything before? If the answer is no, you're out.
Even the bigger ones that have done the big Kickstarters, it's like I've seen Cool Mini, they start piling those miniatures in, and it's like, you Kickstart for 500 and you get 8 million models. My friend Matt, Kickstarter, I forget the name of the game, but it was like he just had like every couple of months these giant boxes of miniatures coming in. And it's just like, one, who needs this many miniatures?
Right.
But two, it's just wild, right? So like, I think Kickstarter is a great platform for making games happen that otherwise wouldn't. But there are risks. I mean, they say it in the terms, right? There's a reason that it's like, hey, we can't do anything for you if they end up not delivering.
I think it's just a correction. I think it's a correction in consumer understanding, and it needs to happen because if you're a producer and like GameSuit gets into a ton of trouble, like they've been drugged through the ringer. I see it on our board games all the time.
They're the people that sold Tim and I our Crokinole board.
Yeah,
that took 4.5 years.
They're the people, and so they've spun off a bunch of different companies of different names that are at Gen Con, and apparently it's total scam. It's like grifting material. So we should probably cover that at some point on podcasts as well. But you have to, as a consumer on Kickstarter, you have to understand how the platform works, and we have to get away from the idea that this is a retail transaction. And this is why retail transactions are so much more consumer friendly in so many ways, and that's why they cost more.
Yeah.
Right? It's guaranteed.
And I think that's the other trick is that part of the problem is that there were a number of companies who effectively were using Kickstarter as a pre-order platform.
Right.
Which is fine. You can do that. But that set the expectation that when you back, you're backing it with a legitimate publisher who's done this before, who knows how much it costs, who has run in... Because you wouldn't believe in making a board game the number of manufacturing problems that absolutely can be run into, particularly when you're not at scale, right? If you're printing 2,000 or 3,000 copies of a game, it's like your box size getting printed 1 inch too big.
Yeah, which apparently happened to Steamforge.
Yeah,
right?
It's like it means your case boxes are too small. It means the trucks you had originally budgeted for are too small, etc.
It also means on the no scale piece, they don't care.
Yeah.
The manufacturers don't care. Like, hey, I want a refund. We're not doing it.
Yeah.
What are you going to do? Right? You want
Precisely.
an international lawsuit on your hands?
And it reminds me too of I've seen some Kickstarters that remind me of the recent Fire Festival.
Oh man, great documentaries.
Documentaries, which is just like they sold this incredible experience, having no idea how to actually pull it off.
They sold an idea.
And a lot of companies that I've seen on Kickstarter have done that, where it's like, we haven't done the math on the size of our box and can we fit all the miniatures in it, and if so, how does that affect the cost of all the stuff? But yeah, you just have to kind of know what you're getting into, and the simpler it leans, the more comfortable I am.
They also planned the most cherry-picked scenario possible for all of it working out perfectly, right? It's like if all of these 17 variables line up, which they will, we've got this, all of them will line up, it'll be on this date, and it's like, one of them goes wrong, everything crumbles.
Yeah.
So you got to plan for that, right?
So
Luke Crane runs an incredible Kickstarter. Torchbearer, Burning Wheel, all the compendiums that he's put out, the LARP that he did.
Works at Kickstarter, so he knows what's up.
He runs one of the major, I think he runs the games division.
Yeah, he does. Or he did.
And even then, he's not totally, sometimes it's a delay. Or he had a thing where his new Torchbearer books came out. His an updated, it wasn't Torture, a new Burning Wheel compendium, which is a discussion worth having because what they did was they put all the errata and tweaks and stuff, but they couldn't change the page layout because it was such a disaster for him to redesign the pages. So they had to change everything without changing where all of the content actually fell on the page. So it was by deleting words and adding new words, but you couldn't change the length of a paragraph or any of that. So they went through and redid the book by just making those kinds of edits, which I think is, first of all, fascinating.
Yeah.
But second of all, he said, everybody who was in on the first Burning Wheel, I appreciate your business. I'm going to give you this book for $15 or $10 or something. For 7 days, you can pre-order it. Comes out with an update. Okay, so here's the deal. We got so many pre-orders for this that it's literally our entire print run, and we would lose money if we sold all of these books at $15. So I'm giving you guys a choice. You can vote on one of two options, raise the price of the books and charge you an extra amount, or increase the price of the books for future pre-orders and add shipping. It was some variable scenario. And so everybody voted and was stuff happens. And worked through it and had a solution, and it changed, and then moving on, right?
That honestly...
That would have crushed some publishers. And this is a book.
Yeah, but he also has a very specific relationship with everyone that he's sold these books to, right? And so, but that's communication. So
yes.
This is what I'm talking about with communication,
Exactly.
where it's I feel like people are so forgiving. If they just know what's going on,
Yeah.
it's incredible.
Because it's happening anyway.
Yeah,
right?
And I
not
think,
talking about it is not preventing it from being a problem.
Yeah, and I think just ignoring it and acting like it's not there. And it's maybe when the new set comes out, people will be so excited they forget.
Yeah.
And it's they don't forget, right? And that wears
People
on
don't
people.
forget.
And I think, assuming the thing you were talking about, assuming they voted to increase the price.
Yeah.
that is the kind of thing that restores my faith in humanity.
Absolutely.
On a fundamental level that happens, and it's like, okay, look, people are reasonable.
Yeah.
This is great, and like there are a lot of very reasonable people that are incredible, right? And so I think that's an awesome story. I would love to know more.
Well,
about
and
that.
down the line, the response was generally, we don't care how much it costs. I just want the book.
Yeah.
Right. It's like I will spend any amount of money on this thing because I love what you've done so much. So when you add that much value to somebody's like life, they're willing to like support you back.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, that's where like with the Takedo Deluxe Edition, it took like 8 to 10 months longer than they had said. But the whole time they were posting updates, here's the delay, here's why it's delayed, here's the models that were messed up, and we want this to be better. It's going to take more time. And it's like, I was so happy to wait. It's like, I'm buying this ridiculous premium edition of a game.
Yeah. It's not exactly an emergency.
Yeah, it's like, I'll wait another year. Like, I'm not in a rush as long as I get it. But the other thing with Kickstarter, maybe this is part of the response, Luke could have also just been like, hey, sorry, it's not going to work out. Thanks for the money.
Yeah, right.
It's like, you can't do anything about it. So that's where like maybe we don't care what the price is. We just want the book. It's like, I'd rather pay $25 and get the book than $15 and not get the book.
Yeah,
That's the
or like
options.
get it 3 years later once you've found enough money to make it not
that's
unfeasible.
Right.
So also, Thomas, on Steamforge, if you want to hear our podcast about Dark Souls in particular, which was like one of the greatest bridge-burning Kickstarter stories in tabletop history, and there are many, you can find our podcast on that. I think it's literally called Dark Souls Kickstarter or something. Yeah, and we might revisit that
whenever
at some point too.
An upcoming update to our site actually finally happens. You'll be able to find that very easy on our site.
Yeah, that'd be nice, won't it?
Next question here from Alan Jones. He says,
long time,
no question.
Been a while, huh?
It has been a minute.
Good to see you, Alan.
Happy to see you guys still working hard, as I love watching your casts. As you discussed last cast, all Keyforge would be legal for play years down the road. I think road?
Yeah, road, yeah.
Well, I love this. What does that mean for brick and mortar stores and their space when you have a game that keeps growing and having larger shelf space demands? So,
I think it's pretty simple.
Yeah, I mean,
is it moving or not?
I think the thing about the shelf space demand is that old sets will still be legal, which means, like with Destiny, when the first sets rotate out, even if you have product, it's just not worth nearly as much anymore. But the difference is that I think Keyforge set 1 will stop getting printed, and then the decks that are left, and that will get sold. And if you get stuck on some, you can still sell them. But more importantly is that they don't... I doubt most retailers are going to have every set in stock forever.
Right.
And I doubt FFG keeps printing the first set when set 2 comes out.
Mm-hmm. But it's also really easy math on this, right? So with a game that's going to rotate out, like a Destiny or a Magic, you have to try to hit your inventory perfect where you sell exactly the maximum amount before that event happens and takes all of the value of that inventory down. Presumably with Keyforge, that event doesn't happen.
Sure.
So like you can take a little more risk on the second set, the first set of Keyforge, and it might take you a little longer to sell it, but eventually you can expect to sell that product. And then if you have Call of the Archons on your shelf 3 years from now and it goes in 2 days, you probably buy some more, right? If you can find it, you get more and you keep selling it. Pretty standard retail at that point. It's just like a non-tabletop retail store, how you run your inventory.
Sure.
People are buying it, keep resupplying. If demand slows down, stop restocking it.
And because it's, again, buying a set 1 deck is just as relevant as buying a set 10 deck, that maybe it's not as popular. Maybe people don't want as much of it.
It might be super rare.
It could be super rare. It could be super valuable. But it could also be that, like, some Black Friday sale is, like, half off. And it's like, these are still legal decks.
Yeah.
So, like, versus half off the first set of Destiny right now is fine.
Infinite format. Here we come.
It's like, unless Infinite becomes a legit format that they actually push, then that'll be a problem for Destiny. But we'll see what they do.
All right, going on to question 3. Will Standfest. It's been a while, Will. It's good to see your name as well. Podcast-only listener jumping in here on the comments to give a little feedback. I've been listening to the podcast since the beginning, and I really enjoy it. One of the highlights of my week. That is incredible to hear.
That's awesome.
I'm very serious about that. It means everything to us. The conversational format is working for me right now. That's good. I do miss the topical deep dives that happened early on in the podcast. I don't think they need to be every week, but maybe they still have a place once a month or just on occasion, which is kind of what we're talking about. That sounds like a good idea, especially around history of the industry and such. I feel like I have a much better perspective on the industry through your insights. That's awesome to hear, Will. Also, it is really important to me when you guys hit the relevant news of the past week. I don't get as much time to keep up with it as I'd like and had completely missed the Lord of the Rings board game that was just announced. Those are my thoughts. I have consistently enjoyed your cast, so I'll keep listening regardless of the direction it takes. So we can take that hard left, and Will apparently has committed to still listen. More Taylor Swift podcasts. Here
I
we
was
come.
going to say, does that mean we just get to discuss Taylor Swift every week?
Hashtag Ask Kevin. Have you ever thought about doing a Team Covenant meetup when you guys travel to an event out of town, like for FFG Worlds or a convention that you attend? Just set up a happy hour for fans to meet up and hang with you, especially now that many games are moving to invite only for FFG's Worlds. It'd be a great way to say hi. We have talked about this. I think we always come down on it being a little bit, there's a self-aggrandizement to it that feels uncomfortable for me. Like, hey, come meet us.
Come meet me.
How awesome would that be?
Well, I think the important part of this is, and it doesn't need to be come meet us as much as we will be hanging out.
Yeah.
You should come hang out with
and
everybody
meet each
else.
other, right? Yeah.
Because I think that's one of the cool things of the stream that we've been doing is that seeing people interact with each other in the comments of our stream week to week, and then realize that there is this community forming within our community of people watching and listening to us, right? It's pretty cool.
Yeah.
And in fact, I'm actually working right now. I don't know where you're from, Will, but I'm looking at booking a space when I go to Star Wars Celebration in April for like 30 people and posting about anybody that plays Destiny that's also at Celebration, because Chicago also has a big crew of people.
Awesome.
So that's mid-April, but I'm looking at that and doing that on like Saturday or Sunday night while I'm there. Which has nothing to do with Covenant. It just
That'd be
literally
really cool.
me being like, hey, I want to play Destiny, and we're here, and there's nothing else to do except hang out. So like, let's hang out and play Destiny.
I like that. We might do like a Gen Con style meetup would be cool.
Yeah.
Or like, we'll be at this place.
The trouble with Gen Con is it's absurdly busy.
It's infinite.
So like,
Adepticon might work.
that could work, yeah. Well, we kind of do that.
That's
we just
true.
Don't publicize
It's
it.
Old friends.
Yeah,
from
we have
the old
a
days.
crew that used to come down to Tulsa we had an event called MonCon every year, which is a convention.
It's about 40, 50 folks, yeah.
Dedicated a game we used to play called Monster Apocalypse. And so a lot of them were from Chicago or thereabouts, so we kind of have a gathering there. But to answer the question, we have considered it and will consider it in the future.
Maybe we should consider it more.
Yeah. Yeah.
Last question. Zach,
hit
it's a heater.
All right, I'll do it. I'll read it. Mutton Chop Piper, welcome. That's another face that used to comment a
Classic.
lot.
Yeah, I like seeing all these people.
Mutton Chop, he was the guy that designed those awesome deck boxes for us, right?
Yeah, I think so.
From Gen Con? Thank you for that. He said, question, when we see you on the podcast and playing games on live stream, you appear to be best of friends, almost family, I would say. How often do you disagree about the direction of your business, and who ends up having the final say?
Yeah, it's great, isn't it? Let's talk about it. So here, actually, this is...
Yeah, well, you tell me.
Well, this is something that is really important to us. Jonathan and I are family, so we're brothers, and we've been working together now since the beginning. Zach and I have been friends for, 20 years now? Probably?
Yeah, I mean, we've known each other for 20
18?
plus, and then we started hanging out for the various card games we played probably when I was 12, so 18, 19 years ago.
Robert and I have been friends, and Robert, Jonathan, and I have all lived together, right? So these are very, there's a lot of, it would be easy for everything to go bad. Like we've put ourselves in situations that are traditionally reserved for relationships that are going to go poorly, right? Where it's like, hey, let's live and work together 24/7.
Well, in particular,
and be okay with it.
Back in like the 2012, 13, 14 range, it was like we had just opened the store, you guys were living together, and it was very stressful.
Yes.
Because we were all working way too much, getting paid way too little, and it felt like everything we did and everything we decided really, really mattered. And so every decision,
life or death, really.
Yeah, every decision we take, it was like, should we put the table here or there? And it's like 2 hour like throwdown,
right.
And then you have to go home, right? And the person's there, and this is also like, it's not only the people you work with, it's your social circle as well. Not just that you live there, but like you're in the same groups, so you go to the same weddings and you go to the same events and the same birthdays and stuff.
Same weekend festivities, right?
Yeah.
So it would be very easy, and what you have to have in those situations is an awareness of how fragile it is. And then you have to have, to me, I think, a very logical framework and response to solve problems without a personal investment. And that is extremely difficult, and it's not 100%, the case.
I was going to say, it can be personal.
But you have to culturally invest in that understanding and systems that are going to do what is possible to remove that personal friction from the business side of decision making. And so what that generally means is you can't make decisions based on this is how I feel about things. You have to come to the table with, here is why I feel certain ways, or here's why I think certain ways. This is the data that I'm looking at. This is the trending that I've seen. This is the guess that I'm making, and here's why. And you have to remove, it has to be so objective, and we can always do better at this, but I think that's one of the things that has allowed us to do this for so long without having disagreements that ruin friendships and business relationships.
Sure.
You have to divest yourself personally, and you have to know that you're doing that. And you have to be willing to do that, which is not easy. And then you also have to be wrong based on what other people are bringing to the table in terms of reasoning, right? Sure. So for Robert and I especially, I think we're both very naturally, like I would call Kantian and utilitarian philosophers. And so that allows you to look at a situation. I think we've gone a lot of our lives trying to look at situations very objectively. And then as you kind of spread that around and say, like, as long as most people are on board to be very objective in their decision making, I think you can get along and have disagreements.
Sure.
And then that's why I think Zach has been super important as essentially kind of the, as the CEO,
sure,
does have the final say, right? And you have to know that somebody has the final say.
Or you just never get anything done.
Or you just argue forever,
yeah.
Right? So that's been a very effective thing, is to know that there is a tiebreaker. There is somebody who is going to have the final say. And Robert and Jonathan and everybody else here can bring whatever, their data points are to that discussion. And then if we all can't come to an agreement and we disagree, then there's a tiebreaker there. And as long as you're divested from that decision personally, you move along with it and you go. And then you can say, look, this worked. I'm happy that I was wrong. Or this didn't work. I think my approach would have been better, and maybe we should give some weight to that next time.
Right? Sure. Well, and I think just it's really fascinating. I actually think it could be a hilarious case study in like decision making, and just thinking about how we've evolved as an organization, as a group, even as a handful of people over the past decade is pretty crazy.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of strengths and there's a lot of weaknesses, but I think the other part is like, I don't necessarily think any of us are the kind of people who, I don't even know the right word to do it, but it's like I don't ever feel like I'm trying to like ramrod people or do this because I said so, or that kind. And we just don't have that kind of relationship with each other, and so there's a lot of respect, and I think that's really required. And because we all are logic thinking, objective people, even though I lean more towards the like Leroy Jenkins.
You do have. Sometimes it works though. It's a crazy thing, Sometimes it works.
It's a great balance, because like I think one of the things that we do now a lot is subscriptions for all these games. And I remember when we first started doing subscriptions, we didn't have a good system for that at all. I mean, it was chaos. It was a mess. It was a lot of work. And
it was PayPal refunds.
Yeah, and back then, right? It was like you sign up, you automatically get charged every month whether or not a product comes out, and we know how often products don't come out. And then we'd have to go in and manually charge and say, hey, we just want to let you know we refunded your order. A lot of work, but my get in there, don't read the rules mindset is like I actually went and did it, right? And then it was like, oh, there's enough people doing this that it's worth investing a lot to make this actually a way better system. But I'm really bad at building that system. Like that's not where my strengths are. So I think it's understanding strengths and weaknesses, and then having a lot of trust in that we all want the best for the organization and the group, and a lot of respect in each other's opinions and whatnot. So
tremendous amount of self-awareness too.
Yeah, I mean, there are very few times where there have had to be two diametric opinions with a deciding vote kind of a vibe, as much as weeks or days or months of discussion and debate leading to an eventual, we all agree this is the best decision to make. Not even that it's consensus as much as it's just like we can work through problems and realize that we have to come to a solution. And I think it mimics a lot of times how, I'm thinking about like, we kind of had at least we had a background of working together on decks and cards and all that kind of stuff. And you start to understand how someone thinks and they process, and if you can communicate with each other, it makes that whole process a
lot better. It all comes down to communication. The old horse that everybody's trying to ride in on.
Is communication.
Big communication.
But we're 12 years in, and I still feel like every day, every month, we're getting a lot better at it. And obviously the needs change as we grow, and we kind of grow the organization, and we change, and more people get introduced, and we're just in different roles. Because there's a distinct difference now than like 5 years ago, when there's 3 or 4 people all working on the same thing. We all know what's going on, and we're kind of facing new challenges now, and how to communicate and how to get things done effectively. So it's a process.
Well, all right, Mutton Chop. I hope you maybe got more than you asked for there.
I think so. That was a long answer.
So that's hashtag Ask Covenant. You can leave that hashtag with a question or an answer that you have for us, or just a general comment, and that will put it on our list, and then we'll choose from those questions or statements to be featured on future podcasts. So we appreciate any amount of interaction that people give us on that Ask Covenant idea, and we thank you for all of the excellent questions today from everybody who we read. So a final question to you. We like to end the cast with the kind of pushing things back out to you, the overall community thoughts on a certain thing. Do you have anything in particular, Zach, before I...
No, I mean, outside the question we asked earlier, which is, what is the most valuable part of the Covenant Cast on a week-to-week basis for anybody listening or watching?
Can I refine that challenge?
This is what
everybody
you do
out
best.
there. Okay, so here it is. If you were to define, as Zach said, the thing that you love most about the cast, can you give us one sentence, just one sentence, how you would describe that value to somebody who you were talking to about this is why I listen? That would be super helpful. I would certainly love it, and we love hearing your thoughts. So,
I have another thing to add to that.
Yeah.
Maybe we just can go, on and on here on the cast, which is essentially, if there's anything we've done or haven't done that you would love to see, like even I think this Mutton Chop question is a very different kind of question than we typically answer. But anything you haven't seen or would like to see from us, I would be curious what that is too. Because It's the kind of thing where we're doing the typical things right now, but who knows?
Give us the rundown. We thank you guys so very much for listening, and until next time, keep playing.